October 15th, 2023, Cascade Mountains, Washington. Dr. Maggie Chen had been living off-grid for 15 years when the grizzly bear walked into her veterinary clinic. The 800-pound predator pushed through the door like it owned the place, sat down, and waited. Maggie reached for her tranquilizer gun. That's when she saw the metal implant behind the bear's left ear, military-grade neural interface, technology she'd helped design in another life. The bear tilted its head, studying her. Then it stood, walked to her desk, and placed a bloody dog tag on the surface. Staff Sergeant David Rodriguez, her former unit, the man she'd left to die in Kandahar. What happened next changed everything she thought she knew about survival, about guilt, about the monsters we create when we think no one's watching. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bear's amber eyes held an intelligence that made Maggie's blood freeze. This wasn't the vacant stare of a wild animal driven by hunger or territorial instinct. This was recognition. Her fingers closed around the tranquilizer gun, muscle memory from 15 years of treating unpredictable wildlife overriding the paralysis that threatened to consume her. The metal was cold against her palm, but her hands remained steady. They always did in crisis moments. It was the quiet times when they shook. "Easy," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the bear or herself. The grizzly's head tilted again, that eerily human gesture that sent ice through her veins. Behind its left ear, the neural implant caught the afternoon light streaming through her clinic's single window. Military specification. She'd know that design anywhere. She'd spent 3 years perfecting it in a classified lab outside Kandahar, back when she believed they were developing technology to save soldiers' lives, not create weapons. Rodriguez's dog tag lay on her desk like an accusation. The metal was fresh, blood still wet around the edges. She could make out the stamped letters: Rodriguez, David A., the man who'd begged her not to leave that night, the man whose screams had echoed across the compound as she'd slipped away into the darkness, choosing her own survival over her oath as a medic. The bear moved with deliberate precision, each step calculated. It walked to her medical supply cabinet, the locked one where she kept the controlled substances. Sat down again, waited. Maggie's throat constricted. Whatever was controlling this animal knew her clinic's layout, knew where she kept the dangerous drugs, knew exactly which psychological buttons to push. "Who sent you?" The words came out steadier than she felt. The bear's lips pulled back, revealing yellowed canines longer than her fingers. Not a threat display, something worse, a smile. Her satellite phone buzzed on the desk beside Rodriguez's tag. The display showed an unknown number, but she recognized the area code: Virginia, Pentagon. She hadn't seen those digits in 15 years, not since she'd disappeared from her old life like smoke. The phone buzzed again, insistent. The grizzly watched her with those two intelligent eyes, waiting for her to make a choice. Answer the call and step back into a world she'd burned to ash, or ignore it and watch this nightmare escalate. Through her window, she could see the trail that led down to Cascade Falls, where teenage hikers liked to camp on weekends. Emma would be coming up from town tomorrow for their monthly supply run. Sweet, stubborn Emma, the closest thing to family Maggie had allowed herself in decades. The phone buzzed a third time. Maggie set down the tranquilizer gun and picked up the satellite phone. "Dr. Chen." The voice on the other end was honey over broken glass. Familiar, impossible. "You're dead." Maggie's voice came out as a whisper. Disappointed? Colonel Sarah Kane, her former commanding officer, the woman who'd recruited her for the neural implant program, the woman who died in a mortar attack 2 weeks after Maggie had abandoned her post. "You left me to die in Kandahar," Kane continued, conversational as discussing the weather. "But you know what they say about assumptions." The bear stood up, moved to the clinic door, and pushed it closed with one massive paw. The latch clicked into place. "What do you want?" Maggie's eyes tracked the animal's movement, calculating distances to exits that no longer mattered. "You know what I want. The kill codes." Of course, the neural override commands that could shut down the implant system instantly. Maggie had written them into the base programming as a failsafe, then encrypted them with biometric locks that only responded to her DNA and voice print. Insurance against exactly this kind of scenario. The program was terminated. All records destroyed. Kane's laugh held no warmth. You always were naive. Did you really think they'd just throw away a billion-dollar weapons system? We've made some improvements since Kandahar. Enhanced range, better neural integration, expanded target selection. The bear moved closer, close enough that Maggie could smell its musk, see the tiny LEDs blinking along the implant's edge. How many? Maggie asked. Bears? Wolves? Mountain lions? Kane's paws stretched like a blade. Or do you mean hikers? Maggie's stomach clenched. The missing persons reports she'd been seeing in the local news. 3 hikers vanishing in the past month. Their campsites found destroyed, but their bodies never recovered. You're going to give me those codes, Maggie. Willingly. Because if you don't, my collection is going to pay a visit to every trail, every campground, every school within 50 miles of your little hideaway, starting with that foster daughter of yours. The line went dead. The bear sat back down, amber eyes fixed on her face, waiting for her decision. Outside, somewhere in the forest she'd called home for 15 years, other eyes were watching. Other predators were waiting. The war she'd run from had finally found her. The bear's stare felt like a weight pressing against Maggie's chest, but she forced herself to move slowly, deliberately, keeping her hands visible as she backed toward the supply cabinet. The tranquilizer gun lay abandoned on her desk, useless now. Even if she could sedate the animal, Kane would only send another, and another. Her fingers found the cabinet's lock, muscle memory guiding the combination, while her mind raced through impossible calculations. How long before Emma arrived tomorrow? 18 hours, maybe 20 if the girl stopped at Miller's store for supplies like she usually did. How long before Kane's patience ran out? The bear's massive head tilted as she opened the cabinet, amber eyes tracking her movements with predatory focus. Inside, vials of ketamine and acepromazine lined the shelves alongside surgical supplies she'd accumulated over 15 years of wilderness veterinary work. Life-saving medications that Kane could turn into weapons with the right animals, the right circumstances. Starting with that foster daughter of yours. Maggie's hands trembled as she reached past the controlled substances to the back corner where she kept her emergency kit. Not the medical kind, the other kind. The one she'd hoped never to touch again. Behind the aspirin and bandages, her fingers found the familiar weight of the Beretta M9. Standard military issue, the same model she'd carried through 3 tours before everything fell apart in Kandahar. She'd kept it cleaned and loaded out of habit, telling herself it was for mountain lions or the occasional rabid coyote. The lie had been easier than admitting she'd been waiting for this moment for 15 years. "Sorry, Rodriguez," she whispered, glancing at the dog tag still gleaming wetly on her desk. Another ghost come home to roost. The bear shifted, a low rumble emerging from deep in its chest. Not quite a growl, more like the engine of some terrible machine winding up to speed. Through the neural implant's soft blue glow, Maggie could see the exit wounds where the device had been inserted, healed but still visible as pale scars against dark fur. The surgery would have required careful precision, knowledge of ursine anatomy. Kane hadn't just stolen the neural technology. She'd assembled a team. Maggie closed the cabinet and turned to face the window, keeping the pistol hidden behind her back. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the Cascade Mountains in shades of amber and gold, the same colors that had drawn her here after she'd fled the wreckage of her military career. This valley had been her sanctuary, her chance at redemption through small acts of healing, treating injured hawks, nursing orphaned deer through their first winter, gradually rebuilding something resembling peace from the ashes of what she'd done. Emma's laughter echoed in her memory, bright and fearless, the way only 17-year-olds could manage. The girl had shown up at Maggie's clinic 3 years ago with a rescued owl chick and a broken wing to match, both of them too stubborn to admit defeat. Emma had been shuffled between foster homes since she was 12, another casualty of bureaucratic indifference, but something about her fierce determination to save damaged things had resonated with Maggie. "You're good at this," Emma had said last month, watching Maggie set a fractured leg on a young elk. "Like really good. How come you're all the way up here instead of working at some fancy animal hospital?" Maggie had deflected with a joke about city traffic and fresh air, but the real answer sat in her chest like shrapnel, because fancy animal hospitals didn't hire cowards who abandoned their units in combat zones. because isolation was the only way to ensure her past couldn't hurt anyone else. Except now, it had found her anyway. The bear rose to its feet with fluid grace, 800 pounds of muscle and bone moving with unnatural coordination. Through the window, shadows lengthened between the Douglas firs, and Maggie caught movement in her peripheral vision. Another shape, low and gray. Wolf, probably, though at this distance she couldn't be sure. Kane's collection, positioning themselves like chess pieces. Her satellite phone buzzed again. Text message this time, just coordinates and a timestamp, tomorrow at dawn. Miller's Crossing, the scenic overlook where tourists like to take photos of the valley, where Emma would drive past on her way up the mountain road. The bear padded to the clinic door and pushed it open, amber eyes holding Maggie's gaze for one final moment before disappearing into the gathering dusk. No growl, no threat display, none needed. Alone in her clinic, surrounded by the tools of healing that had become her life's work, Maggie finally allowed her hands to shake. The Beretta felt heavier than she remembered, cold metal warming slowly against her palm. Outside, something howled in the distance, too coordinated, too purposeful to be natural. The war she'd spent 15 years running from had followed her home, but this time she had something worth fighting for. The howl faded into silence, leaving only the tick of Maggie's wall clock and the hammer of her own pulse. She stood frozen by the window, Beretta heavy in her grip, watching shadows shift between the trees. Every instinct screamed at her to run, throw supplies in the truck, disappear into the Canadian wilderness before dawn. She'd done it before. New name, new life, new lies to tell herself about redemption. But Emma's face floated in her mind. Stubborn chin raised the way it got when she was determined to save something everyone else had given up on. The girl would drive up that mountain road tomorrow like clockwork, probably singing off-key to whatever folk music had caught her attention this week, completely unaware that predators were positioning themselves around her world. Maggie's satellite phone buzzed. Not a call this time, an email, the digital chime as jarring as gunfire in the quiet clinic. The sender field showed only an encrypted string of numbers, but when she opened it, Kane's voice might as well have whispered in her ear. Thought you might want to see what we've been working on. The attached video file loaded slowly, satellite internet crawling through the data. When it finally played, Maggie's blood turned to ice water. Security camera footage, time-stamped 3 days ago. A family campsite she recognized, Elkhorn Creek, about 12 miles north. The Anderson family had brought their injured lab mix to her clinic last month, chattering about their upcoming camping trip while she'd stitched up the dog's torn ear. She'd given the kids stickers shaped like paw prints. On the grainy footage, they sat around their evening campfire, parents in camp chairs while 2 young children roasted marshmallows. Normal, safe. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. At 8:48, the wolves emerged from the tree line, 3 of them, moving with the same unnatural coordination she'd witnessed in the bear. No stalking, no hesitation, just purposeful advance like soldiers executing a tactical approach. The father reached for something, maybe a flare gun, but the lead wolf was already airborne. Maggie forced herself to watch, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't predation. It was a demonstration. The wolves didn't feed, they destroyed with surgical precision, then melted back into the forest as efficiently as they'd appeared. The whole attack lasted 90 seconds. The video ended. Another file loaded automatically. More footage. Different location, different family. Same methodology. Then another. And another. By the 4th video, Maggie's legs gave out. She slumped against the supply cabinet, phone trembling in her hands as the truth crystallized like poison in her veins. Kane hadn't just continued the neural implant program, she'd perfected it, built an army of weaponized predators scattered through hundreds of square miles of wilderness. And she'd been testing them, refining their capabilities. The missing hikers hadn't been random victims, they'd been live fire exercises. Impressive, isn't it? A new text message appeared. Range has improved tenfold since Kandahar. Neural integration is seamless now. Even you couldn't tell the difference between natural and artificial behavior without seeing the hardware. Maggie's thumb hovered over the reply button, then stopped. Responding would only encourage Kane's psychological games. But the woman's voice echoed in her memory, "You know what I want. the kill codes. The failsafe commands Maggie had programmed into the original neural interface. Biometrically locked override codes that could shut down any implant instantly, turning Kane's army of predators into ordinary animals. She'd built them as insurance against exactly this scenario, rogue operators using the technology for unauthorized purposes. But Kane knew about the code's existence, which meant she also knew they were the only thing standing between her weapons program and unlimited expansion. With those codes in her possession, she could sell the technology to the highest bidder without fear of it being turned against her. Foreign governments, terrorist organizations, private military contractors, all would pay handsomely for undetectable biological weapons. Another text, Miller's Crossing. Dawn. Come alone and I'll call off the hunt. Refuse and your foster daughter becomes the next demonstration. Maggie closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years' worth of cowardice crushing down on her shoulders. In Kandahar, she'd chosen her own survival over her duty as a medic. She'd let Rodriguez and 3 others die because saving them would have required courage she didn't possess. But Emma wasn't a soldier. Emma was 17 years old and made terrible jokes while helping injured animals, and trusted Maggie enough to drive up a mountain road that would become a killing ground if Kane carried out her threat. The satellite phone rang. Kane again, no doubt calling to twist the psychological knife deeper. Maggie let it ring once, twice, then answered. I'll be there. Smart choice. Oh, and Maggie? Kane's voice carried the satisfied purr of a predator that had cornered its prey. Bring the original lab files, all of them. Time to finish what we started. The line went dead. Outside, something moved between the trees, gray shapes flowing like smoke through the underbrush. Kane's collection, maintaining their perimeter. Maggie was trapped in the prison of her own making, with 18 hours to figure out how to save Emma without dooming the world to Kane's vision of biological warfare. Her old life was truly dead now. Whatever came next would require a different kind of person entirely. Maggie stared at the dead phone in her hand, Kane's words echoing in the sudden silence. Bring the original lab files. All of them. As if she'd kept that poison after all these years. As if she hadn't spent her first month in the mountains feeding every scrap of documentation to a burn barrel behind the clinic. Almost every scrap. She moved to her desk on unsteady legs, Rodriguez's dog tag catching the lamplight like an accusation. The bottom drawer stuck. It always did when the humidity climbed, but she yanked it open with more force than necessary. Beneath old tax returns and equipment warranties, her fingers found the manila envelope she'd told herself to destroy 1,000 times. The backup files. Not the complete neural interface specifications Kane wanted, but enough fragments to build a basic override. A partial insurance policy she'd kept out of paranoia, wrapped in plastic and hidden like evidence of a crime, which, she supposed, it was. Outside, an owl hooted, too regular, too rhythmic, signal calls. Kane's collection was communicating, coordinating their positions around the clinic like pieces on a chessboard. Maggie killed the lights and moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. Movement in the tree line. A flash of gray fur, gone before she could focus. Then another, closer to the access road. They weren't hiding anymore. No point, when the prey had already been cornered. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. The papers inside were yellowed with age, technical diagrams and code fragments that represented 2 years of her life in a classified Pentagon laboratory. Back when she'd believed in serving something larger than herself. Before Kandahar. Before Rodriguez's screams cut through her dreams like shrapnel. Dr. Chen's been asking the right questions, Kane had said during one of their late-night lab sessions. What happens if someone turns our own weapons against us? We need safeguards. The kill codes had been Maggie's idea. Biometric locks that would prevent unauthorized use, override commands that could shut down any implant instantly. She'd been so proud of her foresight, so certain she was building something that couldn't be misused. The memory tasted like ash now. Her satellite phone buzzed with another text. Still there? My friends are getting restless. Maggie's jaw tightened. She typed back. The files were destroyed. Nothing left. The response came immediately. Liar. Emma's driving your access road right now. Early visit to surprise you. Sweet girl. Wouldn't want anything to happen to her. Maggie's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her binoculars from the desk drawer, rushed to the north-facing window. Through the gathering darkness, she could make out headlight beams winding up the mountain road. Still 3 miles out, maybe 4, but climbing steadily toward the clinic, toward the trap. Another text call her off. One wrong word, and she becomes a demonstration. Maggie's thumb hovered over Emma's contact number. The girl's phone would be connected to the truck's Bluetooth, folk music streaming while she sang along in that slightly flat voice that somehow made everything better. Oblivious to the predators positioning themselves along her route. What could she say? Turn around, go home, don't ask questions? Emma was too sharp, too stubborn. She'd want explanations, would probably drive up anyway out of concern. And Kane would be listening, analyzing every word for deception. The headlights disappeared around a bend, then reappeared closer. 2 miles now. Maggie's training kicked in, the old reflexes she'd tried to bury under 15 years of healing animals and living quietly. Assess the situation, identify assets, plan contingencies. She had the Beretta, 1 full magazine plus a spare. Enough veterinary sedatives to drop a horse, though getting close enough to use them would be suicide. The partial files in her hands, not what Kane wanted, but maybe enough to buy time. And she had the high ground. The clinic sat on a rocky outcrop with clear sight lines in 3 directions, approachable only by the access road. Good defensive position if she could keep Emma away from the killing zone. The headlights vanished again, this time behind a stand of Douglas fir. 1 mile out, maybe less. Maggie closed her eyes, felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. In Kandahar, she'd chosen survival over duty, self-preservation over the lives of her unit. The decision had saved her skin and cost her soul. But Emma wasn't a soldier who'd signed up for sacrifice. Emma was 17 and made bad jokes and believed broken things could be healed if you cared enough to try. She was the closest thing to family Maggie had allowed herself in decades, and she was driving straight into hell because she didn't know monsters were real. The satellite phone buzzed one final time. Tick-tock, doctor. Choose fast. Through the window, Maggie could see the glow of approaching headlights painting the trees. In 90 seconds, Emma would round the final curve and come into range of whatever Kane had positioned along the access road. Maggie picked up the phone and started dialing.